Hey everyone, welcome back to the Michael Lofton Show on Reason and Theology. Let's talk about Pope Leo XIV and a message that he just gave today in a papal audience where he's highlighting the importance of the family and the traditional role of the family, a union between a man and a woman. He's also standing up for the rights of unborn children. In addition to that, he is standing up for religious liberty in society, a theme that is thoroughly embedded in the Second Vatican Council. As Pope Leo XIV told us at the beginning of his pontificate, he is going to carry out the reforms of Vatican II, and we're seeing that in all of his speeches. So let's take a look at what he is saying here, both from a Catholic source, and then let's take a look at it from a secular source. And so what the secular media is saying about the same papal audience. And then briefly after that, let's take a quick look at the Second Vatican Council's document, Dignitatis Humanae, that speaks of religious liberty that he is highlighting in this papal audience. Before we dive in, let me remind y'all to hit the subscribe button and the like button if you haven't already. So you should be able to see on your screen an article that speaks of this audience. Pope Leo XIV to diplomats: peace and justice can be achieved by investing in the family. This is from CNA, a Catholic media outlet. After that, we're going to take a look at NBC News to see what a secular outlet is saying. So they note Leo XIV on Friday, so today, said peaceful societies can be achieved if governments invested in families founded upon the stable union between a man and a woman, in his first address to the diplomatic corps accredited to the Holy See. So he's saying that if you want a peaceful and successful society, how do you have that? Well, governments have to be invested in the family. And what is the family? What is this basic structured unit that we have in society that makes up society? He says a stable union between a man and a woman. That's a message that society today really needs to hear, and many governments need to hear, because there are many societies right now that are pushing for views that are not traditional, views that don't reflect this. He says, you know what? If you want a stable society, if you want a peaceful society, governments need to invest in traditional families, the stable union between a man and a woman. Welcoming more than 100 ambassadors to an audience held inside the Vatican's Clementine Hall, the Pope stated that resolving global inequalities, as well as deep divisions between continents, countries, and individual societies, starts in the home. So you want to see a solution to the problems in society, broadly speaking? Well, you got to start at the most fundamental level, at the root, which is the home. You have to have a stable family. He says this can be achieved above all by investing in the family, founded upon the stable union between a man and a woman, a small but genuine society, a prior to all civil society, he added, citing Rerum Novarum from Pope Leo XIII, whom he took his name after. And we know he took his name after Pope Leo XIII because he told us that. And he said because he was inspired by Pope Leo XIII's document Rerum Novarum, which was absolutely essential in laying out the Catholic perspective on social justice and society. He says, indeed, the church can never be exempted from speaking the truth about humanity and the world, resorting whenever necessary to blunt language that may initially create misunderstanding, he remarked. Well, that's the truth. How many times has society misunderstood the message of folks who want to spread a traditional understanding of the family? Well, many times. Words are often twisted, taken out of context. He says, initially there are some misunderstandings, but it's still necessary to offer that blunt language. The society is founded on the family, and that is made up of a man and woman. In his May 16th audience with the diplomatic corps, the Holy Father said peace, justice, and truth are the three essential words and pillars of the Church's evangelical mission and outreach, and the aim of the Vatican's diplomacy with states and sovereignties. The first word is peace, he noted. All too often we consider it a negative word, indicative only of the absence of war and conflict, since opposition is a perennial part of human nature, frequently leading us to live in a constant state of conflict at home, work, and society. Reiterating his message of peace on the day of May 8th election, when he was elected as Pope, the Pope told the ambassadors present at the gathering that peace, the first gift of Christ, is an active and demanding gift necessary for building relationships. He says, I believe that religions and interreligious dialogue can make a fundamental contribution to fostering a climate of peace. So here he is again, pushing religious dialogue. Do y'all notice that? It's already a theme for him. He's been saying from day one he wants to push for religious dialogue. So this would be dialogue with non-Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims, Jews. He's already issued some material to Buddhists, also to Jews. But here he's speaking broadly. Religions and interreligious dialogue can make a fundamental contribution to fostering a climate of peace. He thinks that this will further go to help bring about peace in society, the more that religions are dialoguing with one another. He says this naturally requires full respect for religious freedom in every country, since religious experience is an essential dimension of the human person. So here he's pushing for Vatican II's notion that everyone should be free to practice their religion in society. So if you're a Buddhist, you should be allowed to publicly practice Buddhism. Or if you're a Hindu, you should be publicly allowed to pray to your gods and perform your rituals and do all of that. He's saying the same, of course, for Christianity. Also saying that Christianity should have those same freedoms secured. But he's saying really religious freedom for everyone should be allowed in every country. Where did this come from? Well, of course, you see this in the Second Vatican Council in its document Dignitatis Humanae, which we'll take a look at here in just a moment. But it talks about how all religions have this freedom to practice whatever their religion is publicly. And it's a freedom that is guaranteed based on their human dignity, and that it cannot be taken away by the state, but in fact, it has to be codified within the constitution of a state, that they have that dignity. So he's saying what Vatican II has been saying. On justice, the Holy Father said, working for peace first and foremost requires acting justly. He reminded government leaders about their responsibility to build harmonious and peaceful civil societies that uphold the dignity of every person. No one is exempted from striving to ensure respect for the dignity of every person, especially the most frail and vulnerable, from the unborn to the elderly, from the sick to the unemployed, citizens and immigrants alike. So here he's bringing up the issue of the unborn. And of course, that impacts the question of abortion. But he's also bringing up the question of immigration. And he says that immigrants also have dignity, and their dignity must also be respected. The need for truth in a world faced with several multi-layered crises, Pope Leo XIV, who identified himself as a citizen, the descendant of immigrants who in turn chose to immigrate, said every person needs and yearns for the truth that can never be separated from charity. Truth then does not create division, but rather enables us to confront all the more resolutely the challenges of our time, such as migration, the ethical use of artificial intelligence, and the protection of our beloved planet. So here what he's saying is there are difficulties with the situation with immigrants, but One of the solutions here is to respect the dignity of all immigrants. And he's also saying there must be an ethical use of AI. He's not against artificial intelligence. We've seen that already from him. He's not against it. He just wants artificial intelligence to be used ethically and properly. And then protection of the planet. We knew that he would have a very strong emphasis on ecology, much like Pope Francis, his predecessor. And here that is starting to come out. Commenting on Leo XIV's remark on migration, European Union ambassador to the Holy See told EWTN that the decision to put immigration and immigration in the one context clearly revealed the underlying Christian worldview of the Catholic Church's truly global Pope. He spoke about the dignity of everybody in society, in particular the more vulnerable ones. Toward the end of his speech, the Holy Father particularly expressed his hope for peace, justice, and truth, to start in places that suffer most grievously. And here the context was Ukraine and the Holy Land. Following the papal audience, Russian ambassador to the Holy See told Di Donato that the Vatican is a significant player in world affairs. The Vatican is certainly a very important international actor who has moral, political, and psychological, power. This is respected everywhere, including Russia. We respect the role of the Holy See in offering its mediation facilities and in resolving humanitarian aspects, he added. So maybe that will, play an impact on the situation between Russia and Ukraine. Maybe the Pope will be able to influence that situation. We'll see. He has spoken about that before. Now, NBC News, a secular source, is also reporting on this. It says that he affirms family is based on union between a man and a woman. Unborn has inherent dignity. So they're pointing that out as well. They briefly talk a little bit about the situation of religious liberty. Then they also compare his words to Pope Francis. Pope Francis strongly reaffirmed core Catholic teaching opposing abortion and euthanasia, saying that they were evidence of today's throwaway culture. But he also made reaching out to LGBTQ Catholics a hallmark, insisting they're welcome in the church. He never changed the church doctrine defining marriage as a union between a man and a woman and homosexual acts as intrinsically disordered. That's correct. He never did change those. And of course, from the Catholic perspective, he couldn't, right? Those would be definitive doctrines that even a pope is unable to reform and reverse. So it speaks a little bit about Provost, now Pope Leo XIV, and his background here and some of the things that he has said on the matter of homosexuality. For instance, he criticized the homosexual lifestyle. It says, as the then head of the Augustinian order, Provost in 2012 criticized the homosexual lifestyle and the role of mass media in promoting acceptance of same-sex relationships that conflicted with Catholic doctrine. A decade later, during Francis's pontificate, he acknowledged Francis's call for a more inclusive church and said he didn't want people excluded just on the basis of their lifestyle. So here they're trying to indicate maybe there has been a shift in Pope Leo's thinking, and maybe he's a little bit more inclusive than he was before. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily the case. You can both criticize the homosexual lifestyle and also still call for a certain level of inclusivity. And we actually saw that with Pope Francis, right? So I don't know. I think that might be a little bit of a stretch for them to suggest that he's kind of going a little bit more liberal, but we'll see. I mean, he might be Pope for 10, 20 years, right? So there might be a whole lot of time to kind of get a better feel for him on some of these things. I'm sure he will be speaking about them directly and explicitly at some point. So I suppose we'll find out soon, right? But hearkening back to Vatican II's document Dignitatis Humanae, Pope Leo XIV, and emphasizing religious liberty and rooting it in the dignity of the human person. Vatican II says this: this Vatican Council declares that the human person has a right to religious freedom. This freedom means that all men are to be immune from coercion on the part of the individuals or social groups or any human power, in such wise that no one is to be forced to act in a manner contrary to his own beliefs, whether privately or publicly. whether alone or in association with others, within due limits. And the due limits here is, what's good for society, right? So Vatican II is saying that people have the right to worship their god or gods or whatever their religious beliefs are. They have a right to it publicly. There's some tension here with some of the preconciliar popes who suggested a little bit of a different perspective, right? And so there's some people who think that there's a contradiction. I did actually just offer a course um, exploring that in more details. In fact, since we're talking about it, let me just bring it up. It's at rtcourses.com. RT courses, R as in reason, T as in theology. Just click on magisterial difficulties, exploring tensions in the church. And I got 2 lectures there. And I do talk about the question of religious liberty and some of the tensions there in the documents and potential ways to harmonize them. So maybe go and check that out if that is of interest to you. Putting that to the side. So Dignitatis Humanae from Vatican II is saying that the person has a right to worship their god or gods, whatever their religious belief is, in private and in public, because of their human dignity, a right that they have from God. So they don't have a right to falsehood, but they do have a right to act on their beliefs, even if their beliefs are in error. So it says the council further declares that the right to religious freedom has its foundation in the very dignity of the human person, as his dignity is known through the revealed word of God and by reason itself. So they say this dignity that allows for this is known by scripture and reason. This right of the human person to religious freedom is to be recognized in the constitutional law whereby society is governed, and thus is to become a civil right. So it's to be enshrined in the constitution of every society. So that's effectively what he's hearkening back to and drawing off of whenever he speaks of religious liberty in this papal address. It's rooted in Vatican II. And also, of course, in the post-conciliar popes who have promulgated Vatican II, each one of them in their own magisterium. Pope Leo XIV is now one of them who continues to promulgate the documents of Vatican II, and he has said that that's absolutely key to his pontificate, is implementing Vatican II. He made that absolutely front and center. In fact, we looked at that in an audience that he had with the cardinals, I think the day or two after he was elected. He gave an address to the College of Cardinals in Rome, and that was one of the number one things that he said, in addition to saying that he is going to carry out the legacy and the vision of Pope Francis for the church. He's going to continue synodality and collegiality, going to continue Vatican II, all of these things. One commenter is saying, I've noticed he has consistently quoted Francis in every one of his speeches. That's true. Absolutely. And I've pointed that out. Every one of his speeches, he's quoting Vatican II, Pope Francis. Sometimes he'll also quote some church fathers. One thing's for sure, it's either Vatican II or Pope Francis. I've seen a few where he didn't quote church fathers, but he did quote Vatican II and Pope Francis. And in some, John Paul II, and in some, Benedict, right? So I think what you have here is somebody who is really wanting to highlight the need to continue to carry out the reforms of the Second Vatican Council. And I do think that he's going to be able to do so in a way that perhaps brings a little bit more clarity than from the previous pontificate. I don't think that there will be any substantial differences. I don't think there will be any major ruptures, between these two pontificates, the current one and the one previous to this. I think they'll be substantially the same. However, I do believe that he will be a lot better in articulating the position of the church, and probably lend himself a little less to confusion from the media, as the previous pontificate appeared to have really struggled with. And so that's probably due to the fact that he's a canon lawyer, a mathematician. And so my estimation is he's an analytical thinker. He's a lot better at articulating himself, and thus less susceptible to fake news, distortions from the media. Those things will still happen. But if you're better with your words, if you're more guarded with your words, it will happen less. because there's less ammunition for people to be able to use and twist and create ambiguities. People will still do that, right? But they'll be able to do it to a less degree. I actually saw a kind of a silly headline from a Catholic bishop, um, who tends to be a problematic figure in the Catholic Church. And in the address of Pope Leo XIV to the College of Cardinals, he mentioned how he wants to proclaim the gospel and how he wants to carry out the reforms of the Second Vatican Council. And he mentioned that in that particular order. And the bishop came away saying, I think the headline was something like, Pope Pope um, Pope doesn't want to make Vatican II a priority. He makes the gospel number one, not Vatican II. And they're completely reading a little too much into him, right? He wasn't necessarily trying to say that, but just because of the word order, they made a huge deal out of it. I give that as an illustration of people can still twist your words, even if you're incredibly clear, right? People can still do that. No matter how clear you are, no matter how articulate you might be, people can still read into you. And at that point, it's a problem with them, not with the speaker, right? It's a problem with the interpreter. They have deficiencies in their ability to analyze information. And so we've seen that before with the previous pontificate, but I do think that Pope Francis didn't do himself any favors, and perhaps made it worse because he kind of opened himself up to exploitation by not being as clear as he could be. So he just aggravated the situation even more. And I've spoken about that for years. It's nothing new to those of y'all who've been following the channel for a while now. Y'all know that's been my take. I think that the current Pope will be a little less susceptible to it, but there still will be fake news, whether it's from the extreme right, extreme left. There will be fake news from both quarters nonetheless. And I think we're already seeing that in the media, and I suspect it'll actually get worse as the days and maybe even years progress. But we'll see. We'll see how it all pans out. I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and if you found it beneficial, please hit the subscribe button and hit the like button. And also consider supporting me on Patreon or right here on the channel by hitting the join button right next to the subscribe button. And that helps me to continue to be able to offer content to you guys for free. Also, check out my courses at rtcourses.com, especially if you want to check out the course on magisterial difficulties. I think you'll really enjoy that. And there's also some free resources on there that you might find to be helpful. So certainly check those out as well. All right, that's going to do it for today. See you all tomorrow. God bless.